viewers. In today's video we're going to be visiting a location that's fairly close to home, which I didn't even know about until just recently. It's something special, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the experience with me of going along, finding the location, making the picture, and then as an extra special addition, we'll come back here to the office, we'll load up the raw files, and I'll show you how I process them in Lightroom and Photoshop, and we'll end up with a finished product. So without further ado, let's go to the location.
Well, this morning we're at Cedar Creek. It's a little bit west of Brisbane and at the foot of the Mount Glorious Range. There's a beautiful little creek, you might hear it bubbling in the background, that runs through here, and a bit of a surprise. Let's go down and have a look. How good is this? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Lovely flowing creek. This amazing structure in the background here. It's been built by the resident who lives on the opposite side of the creek where the main road runs, and it's something of a hidden treasure because you can't actually see it from the road. And I wouldn't have known it was here if not for some of the amazing photographs posted on Australian Landscape Photographers.
Well, here we are back in the office, and it's time to start processing our pictures. Now, I may have mentioned before that all my photography is shot in RAW format, and RAW format is something similar to a digital negative. So in the old days we had to bring our negatives home and process them through several different chemical baths to produce the final printable negative. These days we use a digital negative called RAW. So whilst the pictures that come out of the camera are immediately visible, they're very flat, they lack contrast, and they need quite a bit of processing to bring them up to a reasonable quality. So I'm going to use a program called Lightroom, and I may use Photoshop today to process the pictures, or the images rather, that we've taken down at Cedar Creek, and I'll walk you through that process and show you what happens. Okay, so here we are back in the studio, and what we're going to do now is take the images. So here we've just opened Lightroom, and normally we would, you can see up here Lightroom has 53,028 photos in it, or images in it, which I've downloaded over a period of time. So normally what we would do is we would come here to the import button, click import, identify where our photos are stored, and then bring them into Lightroom. I've already done that for today, so these highlighted images are the ones which relate to the photo shoot from this morning. Okay, so what we'll do then is generally you start to look at your images, and the thing to keep your eye on is this little graph at the top here. It's called a histogram, and this side of the histogram represents dark colours, and this side of the histogram represents light colours, and a average exposure, or a correctly exposed image, will represent something of a typical bell curve with a peak in the middle and tailing off towards the lights and the darks. So by looking at various images, you can see this one is skewed slightly to the darker side of the histogram, and it's got a fair peak in it. By comparison with this one here, which has much more detail in the lighter areas, and tails off very rapidly in the dark side. An example of a very dark image would be this one down here, where we can see that all of the detail or all of the information in the picture is clustered over here on the left hand side of the histogram, and that one would have a lot more detail in it, but it would take us a lot more processing. So I've already chosen that we're going to work on this image here today, 8651. If you can see, it's got a very nice comfortable bell curve in the middle, so a lot of information, colour information and detail information in the middle of the image, and it tails off towards the corners, and there's no high peaks on either side, so that means that the image is pretty well exposed. So that's a good one for us to start with. So we'll just bring it up green, and we can see that even though the histogram tells us that it's got a fairly good exposure, it's still a little bit blown out. Blown out meaning there's still just a little bit too much white in the image, and we're losing detail on this face of the tower. We're losing a little bit of detail here in this dark side of the bridge, and in the shadows, so we can pull some more information out of there. So we'll go up to the develop module, and that will open our image for us to start to develop. And the very first thing I would do on this image is to go to my crop tool and my angle, and I'm going to take a straight line, pick where there should be a straight line from this straight down here on the tower, and just hold that for a second and make sure that the image is in fact level, and it looks like it is, so we'll say done. Then we come to our basic tab, so we open that up, and first thing that I do with my basic tab is I go to my whites. So there's a white slider down here. I suppose I shouldn't jump about. These sliders all control different aspects of the image. So our exposure, our contrast, and you'll remember I said that a raw image is generally a little bit flat. So we can bump up our contrast and make the image a little more punchy by playing with that. We can control our highlights, our shadows, our whites, our blacks, and I'll show you how to do this. Now, the other thing that we can control is our white balance. So at the moment, this white balance is set to as shot, and it was fairly early in the morning, and it was fairly cloudy. And just for the purpose of the exercise, I'm going to change this to show you what happens. So before I do, you can see that our colour temperature is set at 4650 Kelvin. And if I change that to cloudy, we will change our colour temperature here to 6500 Kelvin. And if we look at the image, we can see straight away that what it's done is put a lot more warmth into the image. So it's bumped up the yellow tones. You may have noticed also that this slider moved from the blue end of the scale further up towards the yellow end of the scale. So that's the before, that's the after. Before, after. I actually don't like that, it's a little bit too much, so I'm going to manually bring that white balance back down to probably somewhere around 5300. I think it's pretty good. So then our exposure. Now remember, we've said that we've got a nice bell curve here, and our exposure looks pretty good, so we'll probably leave that alone at the moment. And our contrast, we are a little bit flat, so we're going to just slide that up to the right just a little bit. If I go all the way, you can see that it gets very, very punchy in here, very dark, and not pleasant. So we'll bring that back. I think we'll increase the contrast just a little bit. You may not be able to see this on the video, but what it's doing, it's taking the milkiness out of it, and so we'll give it about or I'd say about a plus 14 in contrast. Now our highlights, that's the bright areas of the image, and you remember I said that this face here of the tower was a little bit blown out or losing detail. So we'll try and bring the detail into that face of the tower back by sliding our highlights slider down. I'll just steadily bring it down, and you can see that the rocks, I've brought it all the way down now, and all the rock detail is now much more visible in that part of the tower. Then we said that we'd lost detail over here in the shadows, so we'll slide that shadow slider the other way and try and bring up some detail in the shadows. And so we can also provide a little bit more punch by bumping up the power of our blacks. So what I'm going to do on this one, I hold down my Alt key and slide this slider at the same time. You see the screen goes completely white. And as I slide it to the left, I'll go all the way. You get yellow and black patches which show you that those parts of the image are going to be solid black. So we need to back that off slightly so that I've got just a couple of areas in the image which are solid black. And if I touch my before and after key, you have a look here in the area of the rocks. Before, after. Before, after. Much more punch in it. Now the secret sauce, this clarity slider. If I slide that to the right, that's going to accentuate the detail in the image and make this image really pop. Similarly, if I went to the left, I can make it quite dreamy and maybe even more like a fairy tale picture, which might be suitable in some circumstances. Some people would like that. But we're going to go for about a 12 on clarity, and we'll just increase the vibrance slightly to punch up the greens and the colours in this rock wall. Okay, so that's about all we can do on the basic slider. Our tone curve gives us the ability to increase the contrast, so we'll go for a medium contrast on that today, and that's made a huge difference. Before, after, before, after. Then we come down to our effect slider, and we're going to give it just a very slight vignette. Now a vignette is where we add a dark border, generally in a somewhat sort of oval shape, and that brings our attention to the center of the image. I'm going to do it excessively just to show you exactly what we're talking about. So that's an excessive vignette, and we certainly don't want it to be anywhere near that much. We come back to 0, and then we'll just pull in just a couple of points, just 14 points to just touch the darkness around here and lead our eye into the center of the image. And that's about it. Go back to our detail tab. Going to increase our sharpening. So all digital photographs, even ones shot in JPEG, need some level of sharpening after they've been developed. And so that's a very normal process. And photos that haven't had sharpening, we don't want to sharpen the whole picture, we only want to sharpen the edges. So we're going to again hold down our Alt key and slide our masking slider to the right, and everything that is white is being sharpened and everything that's black is not. When we started it was like that, so the whole picture was being sharpened, and we just want to sharpen our edges. And so that's where we would leave that image. And so I hope this has been an informative video. I realise it's dragged on just a little bit, but it's been a fairly lengthy process to show you in depth how some of these images are achieved.